Hello everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the Elementalist, and more specifically, the build that has been annoying the crap out of me the past week. Yes, we are going to look at a specific build for Elementalists that was made mainly so that Elementalists could take down a trebuchet without having to worry about their health at all. This is an extremely sturdy build that leaves Elementalists having great sustain, good enough defense, and good enough offense without having to worry about themselves or their opponent. Before I get into the weapon skills, because that's gonna be kind of iffy and one of the main tricks to this build, let's talk about the other skills, mainly because they're more common. For our healing spell, we're going to take Glyph of Elemental Harmony, of course. No other healing skill makes any sense. We're going to have our first utility, which is Mist Form. It's a great stun breaker and leaves you invulnerable, giving you time to work on your cooldowns and keep yourself alive. Next thing is Armor of Earth. This is really important for people trying to ignore their opponent and work on that trebuchet. It gives you stability and protection, so you're not going to take any damage. They're not going to be able to stun you, knock you back, keep you off the trebuchet at all. It's just you're going to be on that trebuchet and focused on it, and they're not going to be able to do a thing about it. Great utility. And the last thing is the Arcane Wave or Arcane Shield. Those are my two guesses. I've seen people use Glyph of Elemental Power just because it gives you some extra damage that your opponent isn't focused on. So I guess that's an option. I liked Arcane Shield. It's got too high of a cooldown for me though. So I'm not sure if I really recommend it, but it blocks 3 attacks then explodes for minimum damage. But I like Arcane Wave because it synergizes well with the Elementalist abilities, and that using Arcane Wave can get you a ton of stacks of might just instantly. And that'll help you build up more power to take down the trebuchet faster. It's a good way to make up for that lack of power that Elementalists have, so that's an important skill to use for your combo fields. And for your elite skill, of course, you're going to take Glyph of Elementals. Usually when you're against a trebuchet and you don't want to have to worry about yourself, you're going to summon the Ice Elemental because it heals you and damages foes really well. It does the second strongest damage other than the Fire Elemental, and it constantly heals you really well. So I'd always stick with that one if you're going to go in for an assault. So let's look at the abilities and what you're going to be focusing on using. Now, the trick to this Elementalist build is that you are able to switch weapons during battle. Now, I know a lot of you aren't used to that, and it's going to have to change. Elementalists are one of those professions that is going to need that kind of practice, and you're not going to be alone in this. I've seen good Guardian specs use switching weapons, even though they can already switch weapons. They use up to like 4 or 5 different weapons. I definitely see engineers switch weapons to get around faster and in different kind of fights. But yeah, definitely for Elementalists, it's important that you're able to switch weapons, because your air attunements and fire attunements and earth attunements are really strong on staff. Earth attunement can get people off your back, so can air attunement. Air attunement can actually knock people off that ledge if you get them close enough and find them in that position. Use that to your advantage and just blow them away really quick. It launches them a lot further than the 5 ability on your scepter. So always have that as an option and look for those openings. That can really knock them out of their routine and give you some extra time to work on that trebuchet. So for your opening, it's pretty obvious. If you can get away with it, use Meteor Shower, and then Lava Font, and then Flame Burst, just because it'll hit your opponent too. Just go with it. It's a rotation. Then switch to your air attunement, and use Static Field to get your opponent off of you. Windborne Speed, you will want that extra speed just so you can keep out of distance from your opponent, especially if they're like a sword pistol mesmer that you really just want to get away from, because you don't want to be taking that damage if you don't have to be. And then Gust if you have an opening. Finally, you're going to get to your Earth attunement. Unsteady Ground can cripple your opponent, but also do consistent damage to the trebuchet. So learning how to hit both targets at once will be really important in those fights. And then you can switch to your opponent and use Shockwave and then try to hit both targets with Eruption. That's a good amount of bleed damage that the opponent's going to have to worry about, and it's a decent amount of burst damage that will hit the trebuchet. Then use your Magnetic Aura and go to Water Attunement at this point. Launch Geyser and Healing Rain if you can, and then back to Fire Attunement to start all over again. Now that's a pretty hard route to do, but if you're good at your mobility and can stay out of the damage, it's probably one of the most effective ways to get a trebuchet down. Just because the damage of Lava Font and Meteor Shower, that will affect your opponent and the trebuchet at the same time. Now, if it's not working, your opponent's sticking to you like glue, and you're just not able to get around well enough, that's when you're going to want to switch to Scepter Dagger. Now this is one of my favorite ways to use an Elementalist. You get your Dragon's Tooth AoE, Phoenix AoE, Ring of Fire AoE, and then your Fire Grab, which does a ton of damage. So here's how you're going to open up. Let your opponent get onto you and use Phoenix, Dragon's Tooth, Ring of Fire, then use your Arcane Wave right after Ring of Fire to do good damage and get a lot of stack Smite from that. That's a good opening move, and then Fire Grab on your opponent for a good, probably about 5k crit. Great opener. And then next, you're going to want to use Ride the Lightning to your opponent, and then Updraft to knock them away. And then from there, switch to your Water Attunement as your second highest damage attunement, just because your auto attacks hurt really bad. So that's when you're going to use your Ice Shards on the Trebuchet, and use your Water Trident and Cleansing Wave to heal up in between, and then switch back to your Fire Attunement to get that combo out again, because that combo is just devastating. I mean, you don't have that much power, you're only at like 1900, so it's nothing incredible, but I'd say Dragon's Tooth 1800, Phoenix probably about 2000, Ring of Fire 1200, and then Fire Grab probably about 5k, and then Arcane Wave probably about 1500. All of that together, that's going to devastate your opponent, leaving him to get out of your way because he needs to recover from all of that damage and make sure he's not going to take that all again. And that's going to give you plenty of time because Water Attunement does a good amount of damage, and then if you want to do Earth Attunement, you can. It doesn't do much damage, but you can get that Rock Barrier up that improves your armor, Dust Devil to blind them, and then switch to Fire Attunement again. It's really all about those rotations and keeping yourself away from your opponent when you're not doing damage. Alright, let's look at the traits to see what makes it so powerful. Now for this build, I'm going 20 in Earth Magic, 20 in Water Magic, and 30 in Arcane Power. So 20 in Earth Magic will give me 200 Toughness and 200 Condition Damage. Alright, I don't really need Condition Damage, but it actually does help because those Earth Attunements stack so much bleeding for no reason. It would be a good amount of damage for them. But let's see what I get. Gain Armor of Earth when health reaches 50% with a 90-second cooldown. Alright, that's good. That gives you more stability, more protection, and remember that this goes off because you don't want to end up using both versions of your Armor of Earth because they won't stack duration. So keep that in mind when you're in a fight. Elemental Shielding. Gain protection for 3 seconds when applying an aura to yourself or an ally. And you apply an aura every time you change an element, so yeah buddy, let's do that. Now we're looking at Water Magic. We have 20 points in that, and that's going to give us 200 Vitality and 200 Healing. 200 Healing is very important, especially to get that extra sustain you want during that fight. But let's see what else we get. We get Soothing Disruption. Cantrips grant you regeneration and vigor. Alright, Mist Form and Armor of Earth are both cantrips, so very useful indeed. Now, Cleansing Wave. Remove a condition from you and your allies when attuning to water. That could be really good when you're fighting a Mesmer or an Elementalist for their trebuchet. Alright, and last we have 30 in arcane power, which gives me 30% to boon duration and 60% to attunement recharge rate. So we get to switch attunements more often, and our boons last longer, which is awesome. Get that fury longer, get that protection longer, get that regeneration longer, and you're just unstoppable force. But let's see what trades we chose. Elemental attunement. When attuning to an element, you and all allies gain fire, might, regeneration, swiftness, or protection, depending on which one you pick. Alright. That's really good. Another way to stack swiftness for your team in the beginning, and always giving you boons when you switch attunements. Next is Blasting Staff. Area attacks with staff are larger. Bingo! We want your ground target attacks to hit your opponent and the trebuchet at the same time, so making those things larger will help you do that. Or push your opponent further away from the trebuchet and giving you more freedom to move around. And last we have Elemental Surge. Based on attunement, arcane skills cause burning, chilled, blindness, or mobilization. Cool. So when we use Arcane Wave, based on what attunement we're in, everyone's going to take burning, chilled, blindness, or even mobilization. Now look at those durations, and that might help you pick which one you want to use that for, because that is going to be a 30-second cooldown. So keep that in mind. Alright, let's look at our runes. Now, for the staff, I chose Sigil of Superior Bloodlust, just because you can't switch weapons, or you can't get a benefit for switching weapons at least. When you're not in the trebuchet, you're mainly a support that's going to be helping set up kills or do consistent AoE damage in the team fight in front of you. So adding more power to that really isn't a problem. I don't see a problem with that. You're only going to get assists or kills. So it's always good to have those. And then on Scepter Dagger, I would take Bloodlust on the dagger and Sigil of Superior Force on the scepter. Honestly, I just can't think of anything for the Elementalist because you have barely any crit chance and you can't properly swap weapons, so you don't get any benefit from those. Unless you want to add extra condition damage, I really have nothing else to do except plus damage or maybe even plus crit chance. And then on the armor, I'm taking all into Rune of Divinity. There's probably a better, more specific one for this, but just to try it out, I picked Divinity. It's a good standby. And then for the accessory, I got Soldier's Amulet, just because it's the most balanced for this kind of thing. It doesn't give you any crit chance, doesn't give you any precision. I mean, I have minimum precision in this besides Rune of Divinity. So that's really it. I wanted to make sure I had the most power, toughness, and vitality all at the same time, so I picked Divinity, and then Soldier's Amulet to keep me tanky, tough, and putting out some good damage. But a lot about the Elementalist is working on that rotation, working on when you need to swap weapons, and practicing the swapping weapons in the first place, because that's going to be kind of difficult, working on making sure you're not in battle and knowing which weapon to swap to for each kind of fight. But that's basically it for this build. There's a lot to this build, a lot of practicing involved with this build, but the payoff is pretty good. You get an unstoppable machine to take down the enemy trebuchet. You get a great support when he's not taking down the trebuchet and whenever he's on any other map. That's just going to set up a lot of kills for your team with those AoE stuns and that AoE fire damage. So I highly recommend this build, even though it annoys the crap out of me when I'm playing Mesmer or something. So have fun with that. I hope you guys learned something from this, and I'll see you next time.